Hi, I'm Sarah Schatz, and you're listening to Kindle Curiosity, a podcast for curious souls where we explore the creative process. This podcast is powered by the Kindle community on Patreon to keep things advert-free. Take a seat by the fire, and let's welcome today's guest. I can't believe we've made it to the end of the first season. This has been such an amazing experience. Thank you all so much for listening and sharing and supporting the podcast. I am really excited about today's episode, but before we get to that, I have a little bit of housekeeping. So I've put together a Kindle Curiosity gift guide, and it features some of the guests from this season as well as some of the listeners. There's some handcrafted items, books, all kinds of exciting things, and you can find that at kindlecuriosity.com. I'd love for you to pop over there and give our guests and listeners a little bit of support as you do your holiday shopping. I'm sure you'll find something that you will love. And I would love to ask, if you've been enjoying this season of the podcast, if you could hop over to iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a review. That really helps other people to find the podcast. And just so you know what to expect after this episode, the podcast will be going on a little bit of a hiatus, but there will be a special holiday episode out in December, so don't miss that. Patreon will stay open, so if you'd like to support season 2 of the podcast, you can hop over there. This podcast is completely powered by Patreon, which means that I don't have to interrupt the flow of things with awkward adverts or go out spending time searching for sponsors. I can use that time instead to talk to new guests and connect with you guys. So a big thanks to all of my patrons. That's all for now. Without any further ado, let's get to today's episode. Philippa Stanton has over 20 years of experience in the creative arts and is passionate about opening up everyone's creative landscape. She's recently published her first book and is based in Brighton, England. Hi, Philippa.
Hello.
So good to talk to you. I've really been enjoying your book.
Thank you so much.
So I did a quick read through before we talked, but I really want to dig into it and go into all the prompts and questions and exercises.
Yeah, it's sort of meant to be a kind of friend or companion, something that it's almost on your shoulder, encouraging you. And, it's the prompts and the exercises are things that I want people to kind of go back to time and time again, or have a little, think about and go, actually, I could try that. Or you can work through it in complete order. But yeah, the prompts and stuff are there to go back to lots of times, hopefully.
So let's talk about your book first. Where did the idea blossom from?
Oh, I like that word, blossom. Because I'm in kind of the throes of it not feeling like blossom. It's more like autumn with it. So it blossomed. I think I'd been approached quite a few times about maybe doing a book with my images, some sort of coffee table type book. And I wasn't really interested in that. I just thought, it would go out of date. And what's it saying? I don't know what that's saying. Yes, it's nice pictures, but I think I had something to say about what I was doing that was a bit deeper than just styling or pretty flowers. I felt like I'd got something to say. I didn't know what that was. And I'd been approached about doing something which sounded maybe not like a coffee table book, but I didn't know what. And then someone got in touch with me from Instagram and said, would I consider doing a sort of bespoke online course for them? The course that I made was a bit of an exercise in just seeing whether I could do that, because this lovely woman had asked me to. So I wrote up a 6-week plan for what the course would be, and in doing that and then in teaching it to her over 6 weeks, I came out of that having thoroughly enjoyed it and also thinking, I know exactly what I want to write a book about now. And it's nothing that's really Instagram centric, even though that's my my social media home, but I wanted it to be about a very personal connection to a creative foundation rather than any Instagram gold or trying to get an instant creative fix. yeah, that's sort of how it came about.
That's really interesting because it did feel like I was in a class or a workshop or even like a university course a little bit.
Oh,
Not in a dry way, but in a very practical way where sometimes when you read books, they're very theoretical.
yeah, that's not me at all. I mean, I haven't got any experience of writing books. I haven't really got any experience of anything like this. So I just kind of make it up in my own way. And to come up with a version of something that I would enjoy. And in terms of, I go to art galleries and I love going to the art gallery shop at the end, and they've got really interesting looking books and some with brilliant titles. And I invariably pick them up and open them up, hoping that they're going to be full of colourful pictures, and it's just words, which, might be brilliant. But I just look at that and I go, oh God, I haven't got time for that. And I need some visual inspiration. So I really wanted the book to feel like I was having a chat with whoever it was that was reading it, and giving them visual inspiration constantly to kind of inspire them to go and look at really ordinary things and find kind of beautiful things in ordinary stuff, or even ugly stuff.
I love that. I think sometimes we can get stuck on Instagram about thinking things have to look a certain kind of beautiful to fit on Instagram.
Yeah.
And for me, it's always been about finding the beauty in my everyday life.
Yeah.
And so I loved that that was a theme that came up in the book over and over.
Yeah, and I think there's a program over here, I don't know whether you have it in the States, called Ready, Steady, Cook. I used to watch it when I was pregnant years ago, and just, it was an afternoon program, and I'd sit there watching Ready, Steady, Cook. And basically, it's going, I've got nothing in my cupboards. How do I make a really good meal with a tin of kidney beans and some tomato ketchup or something? And they'd make these incredible things. I learned how to make a really quick chutney out of kind of nothing. And I've always been really inspired by the idea of thinking you have nothing and going, well, okay, let's make something out of that, because there is something, unless the cupboard is literally completely bare. And people say to me a lot of the time, if I'm doing courses, but I don't have lots of pretty things like you do. And I think, yeah, but you just have to open a drawer and there's all sorts of colourful stuff that you may not think is pretty, but if you put it next to something or make a collection of it, it becomes maybe not pretty, but it becomes really fascinating. And I'm constantly inspired by stuff that, is maybe ugly. I think it's really good to push that out there. And although I may not post that sort of stuff on my actual Instagram feed, I do still take those pictures. I do still document that. That's all part of my foundation. To push myself to look at things out of my comfort zone. And I think that's really important, particularly at this point of where Instagram is, where there is a push, or not a push, there's a sort of general blanket of feeling like, oh my God, we've got to kind of create loveliness. And I'm part of that myself. I post pictures on my feed that I think are my best, but it comes from a lot of foundation of other stuff.
So I'm kind of looking at my questions now because I skipped past where I usually start because I was so excited about the book.
Sorry. Go back. I don't mind, Nothing has to be in order for me.
So, right. Let's go back and let's talk about growing up and what you were curious about and interested about then.
Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier, and my big memories of being a child were spending time in the garden. And I don't know why this sticks in my memory, but I was really fascinated with taking plants apart. And there was this bush in my parents' house. I was absolutely fascinated with it because it had these sort of juicy buds on it. I can't remember any flowers, but it had these juicy green elliptical buds. And I would take them off. I wanted to know what they were. And I remember taking a leaf off, and there was just another leaf and another leaf and another. It's like one of those Russian doll things. And it went down to nothing. I was absolutely fascinated at the makeup of that plant. It's a hebe. So if ever you come across a hebe bud, that is what I was looking at. And I also remember another little flower, being fascinated by it, because they were just, there's a whole load of these little flowers. It was like kind of blossom or something, but from a ground plant. And I remember thinking, I love those. And then pottering over and having a little look at them and looking in the middle of them and finding these tiny, tiny little pink and sort of golden yellow dots, which were absolutely exquisite. But then the kind of centre of this flower was all fleshy and weird. I thought, God, how can that happen? And, I'd take these things apart. That was a plant called London Pride. And so, from being a child, I was fascinated by kind of the structure and makeup of plants and things outside and touching things. And my brother was really, really into chemistry, making, small bombs and doing all sorts of things. And I remember finding this trail of white sort of granular powder up the garden path. And I thought, what's that? That must be something in my brother's. And I thought, well, it looks like salt or sugar. So I licked my finger and dipped it in, tasted it, and it was salt. And I went up to my brother and I said, why have you left a trail of salt? And he just looked at me and he said, how do you know it's salt? And I knew I'd done a really bad thing, but in tasting it, and he really told me off. He's an older brother, but I think I always had a curiosity about experiencing things. I wanted to take a plant apart. I wanted to lick what was on the floor. It's not great, but it's. I think those sort of things were what I was very curious about as a child.
And you write a lot about synesthesia in your book. How soon did you realize that everyone didn't experience the world in that way?
It took quite a long time, really. I mean, I experienced my whole childhood, with that. I don't have kind of massive memories of it, maybe a few, but I didn't talk about it. I just thought that's what being a person was. I didn't think it was, well, I still sort of do actually, but it wasn't until I was in my 20s when I was at drama school and I had a voice teacher who was the hippie voice teacher at the drama school, the one you kind of went, oh God, why have I got the hippie one at this very prestigious drama school? But anyway, she said one lesson, she said, look, when you come next time, everybody, will you bring some pencils and crayons, because we're going to draw the sound, we're going to draw the shapes of the sound of the vowels. And I was like, oh, great. This is what I want to do. The blokes in the class were just like, what is she talking about? And I was like, well, we're going to do the vowel sounds, draw them. They were like, what? Why? No, that doesn't exist. And so it was at that point I kind of thought, oh, I don't understand why they don't get that. They're just being annoying and blokish. And then I think round about that time, I was listening to the radio and there was a programme about synesthesia where they kind of described what it was. And I thought, oh, that's me. That's what I do. So, yeah, it wasn't until I was much older.
And for anyone who's listening and doesn't know what it is, could you give us a little description?
It's a sort of, so synesthesia is basically a merging of the senses. It's when one experiences a sort of visual in an abstract in response to sound or taste or smell. I have it that way round. Some people, I think, can look at things and experience a taste or something. So it's a very broad phenomenon. Actually, I don't know whether that's the right word, but it's a very broad thing, and it's basically about senses and visual stuff all getting kind of mixed up. And weirdly, I think mixed up isn't quite the right expression either. That's a sort of expression that sounds like it's not meant to be like that. Whereas I think we all start off with an abstract processing because we're not born speaking, are we?
That's true.
We're born having to touch things. There must be abstract stuff going on in babies' heads because they don't have words. So there's a way of experiencing something. And actually, I did speak to a scientist once who said, as babies, like your hand, for instance, develops out of one thing. So as you develop in the womb, stuff falls away to reveal fingers, whereas the fetus doesn't have fingers all at once. They sort of appear, and so things get separated as a baby develops. And in a sense, my senses and how I process them are a bit stuck together. They haven't separated in the way that maybe the majority of people manage to separate that thing. Maybe I'm just a big child.
I thought it was really interesting because you wrote in the book about perhaps we all have that when we're babies or when we're young, and then we don't use it in the world, and so it kind of falls away. I'd never heard of it put that way before.
Yeah, I really do think that, and I do also think that you can practice connecting to that. I really feel passionately about that, and probably hopefully from reading the chapter about the senses, hopefully it will spark some sort of interest in people to just try and spend a bit of time listening or smelling things or tasting things without going, oh, I'm tasting this thing. It's just removing yourself and giving yourself time to really experience what is going on in your inner eye, slowing down. In the book, I talk a bit about a very influential teacher that I had, my art teacher, and she took us to the Mark Rothko room at Tate Britain. And, it was quite overwhelming and amazing. And she just said, just in a kind of offhand way, oh, I think he paints what he sees when he closes his eyes. And that was amazing to me. I just thought, oh my God, nobody's ever talked about what I see when I close my eyes. And you can paint that. That's, I found that extraordinary and kind of, heartwarming in a way. I thought, phew, other people have got that going on. And I just hope that somehow with the chapter on the senses that I can awaken that sense of something else that is going on in your mind's eye when you experience things.
Growing up, you were really curious. You were very connected to your senses. Can you connect the dots for me between that and where you are now?
Yeah, I think there's one kind of big dot. It's just like I was just obsessed with that sort of sensory stuff, and like you say, being curious about plants and stuff, and to the point where I didn't ever want that to stop. That's just part of who I am, and I think it was such a kind of overwhelming part of who I am that it just didn't stop. So even though I knew that I wanted to go to drama school and train as an actor, I was always painting and making things and doing things and investigating stuff even when I was there, but when I worked at Shakespeare's Globe, they all teased me because I had my sewing machine in the dressing room. So it's from being a child to being it now isn't a huge difference, to be honest.
I love that you held on to that because I think a lot of people do lose that somewhere along the way.
Yeah, I think people are often, they need to kind of grow up and, take responsibility for things. And I think, a great thing, but also a difficult thing about being an actor is a lot of the time you have a lot of responsibility taken away. You don't need it. You turn up to a rehearsal room, you muck about, you concentrate, you work really hard. I'm not kind of denying that, but you have fun. On the whole, why I love actors and stuff is they're passionate about what they do and they're funny and free and like children. and it's, being in the proper grown-up world is difficult. And so why would you need to, start ripping the heads off flowers? I was lucky enough to go into a profession that there were lots of people like me.
That's true. I worked in the theater too.
Oh, really?
I did. I was the stage manager though, so I was the mum.
Yeah, that's quite a hard job, because you would witness, you're the mum. You would be absolutely responsible for all those errant actors.
Right.
Who they probably annoy you, and they just go, oh, where's this and where's that? You just have to sort it as a stage manager. I have massive respect for stage managers. It's not an easy job.
Yeah, I loved it and I miss it sometimes, but for me it was just having to constantly find a new job. So now I teach theater appreciation. It's a little bit more stable.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's really difficult, I think, as an actor, a stage man, anybody who works in the theatre, you don't know when your next job is coming.
Right.
And, a question I get asked quite a lot, it is, how did you start your Instagram account? Well, a lot of it stemmed from unemployment. And when I was unemployed, I'd paint and muck about doing things, and, and then I'd get a job, and there was a period of time just before I started my blog, actually, where I was kind of working for 2 years non-stop. But you're always aware that you don't know when the next job's coming. And it is something you kind of get used to. You never really get used to it. But that's why it's a vocation, because you go, I have to take all that unemployment just for the moment I get another job. And that's really hard. So a lot of my Instagram started from unemployment.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that. Do you have any other stories about working in the theater before we kind of jump forward?
My son always says, tell me some theatre stories because they're so ridiculous. The only kind of thing in connection to this, like I said, I've always, ever since a child, I've been kind of making things and selling things. And when I was 13 or 14, I embroidered espadrilles and would sell them to local shops. And when I was about 16, I got a couple of local women to make up my designs because I was selling quite a few of them. And I would also, knit one of my mum's baking trays and make some marbled paper and cover pencils and sell them at school. So basically, when I went off to drama school, I was still doing stuff like that. I was making cards, and I would know when everyone's birthday was. And someone said to me, you always know when people have forgotten your birthday because you get loads of Philippa Stanton cards in your pigeonhole, because I'd be up there selling the cards. So I think I met an actor friend of mine last year, and she said, God, I'm not surprised what you're doing because you were always doing it. So I don't know. In terms of the theatre, I was always kind of beavering away in my dressing room doing stuff, and still would, And I can't ever say I'm not an actor because I still do moonlight as that. It's just that the old social media thing, stepped in and gave me a bit more work.
One of the things I love about you is you do so many different things. And even in your stories today, you've told so many different stories about things you create and things you enjoy doing. I think a lot of people feel a need to niche down and brand so tightly to do a single thing. Do you have any advice for people who feel trapped by that?
I look at all that and I think, I need to niche down. I like that phrase. I need to do that. I need to work out exactly what it is. And I just can't do it. I can't even do it with the book. I want to go, right, okay, I'm going to buckle down and just talk about my book. And I think, but I go out in the morning on my bike and I see something that I want to share. It doesn't have anything to do, well, it sort of has something to do with my book, but I'm not a natural niche downer. And I suppose I just have to accept that I do lots of different things, but I do think that's quite important. And I think sometimes if you pare it down too much, you're kind of limiting yourself. I don't know. It's a difficult one because like I said, I look at all that and I think, God, that's brilliant. I want to be like that, but I can't. And I just do lots of different things. There's a guy in the UK when I was little who used to do this program, Record Breakers. It was the kind of UK version, and he was a really talented presenter. He could tap dance, he played the trumpet, he had some world record himself or something. He was an actor, a performer, he did all this stuff. And my mum used to say, well, the problem is with Roy Castle, he's too good at too many things. And it haunts me that I'm like, oh, come on, settle down on just one thing. And I think it's, I've had a real struggle with that emotionally with the acting, because that is what I trained as. That is what I go, well, that's what I am. Yeah, I'm doing this other stuff. And as an actor, you're not really meant to do other stuff. You're meant to make a massive commitment to that. So I feel like I moonlight in both of those areas.
So let's talk a little bit about your painting process.
My painting process is a bit random, really, partly because I suppose in an ideal world, I would like to be painting all the time, whenever I feel like it. And at the moment, it feels like I have kind of big, bouts of painting and then nothing. And I spent the summer in a big studio, which was absolutely fantastic. And I just thought, oh, this is what I want to do. So in that time, I only did one painting that was to do with synesthesia. The other paintings were just kind of emotional, instinctive responses to stuff. And that's what I wanted to really explore. So I kind of almost felt a bit pinned down by my paintings of sound or taste or whatever. I thought, oh no, I did two synesthesia paintings when I was there over the summer. And I love doing that, but I don't like being pinned down. I don't like it going, well, that's exactly what you do, because as soon as I go, oh, this is what I do, I have an idea to do something else. So painting is very much like that. And at the moment, I am in a sort of place of wanting to be very liberated about how I apply the paint, how I paint, and not to be too kind of uptight about what it is exactly I'm painting. So it's a process that develops over a period of time, really.
I always enjoy when you show either your photography arrangement or your painting process on your Instagram, and how you'll come back to the same painting at different times and kind of like scrape things away.
Yeah, I love scraping things away. I mean, it's funny. I really enjoyed working with lots of blank canvases in the summer, but I also had other canvases that I'd either grown to really dislike or just hadn't quite worked or something. And it was a fascinating process because I really like utilising texture of kind of past paintings under things. And like you say, I like painting on stuff and then scraping away and revealing a little bit. But sometimes when you've got loads and loads of layers and you've had a painting going for kind of years, it just becomes too claustrophobic in the end. You just go, there's too much under there. I've got to get rid of it. And actually, I was talking to a group of friends who are all artists, and we've kind of said, have you got paintings in the loft that you kind of can't bear to look at anymore, but don't know what to do with? And we're like, should we burn them? Should we have a special like bonfire night where we take a load of our old paintings and just burn them? And all of us went, oh God, that would be amazing. I'm sick to death of having some of these paintings. And you go, but it's a painting. I feel like I have to keep it. Whereas actually, yeah, some of them just don't work, even when you kind of scrape things away. But there's always a possibility of going, oh, it could. But I think, I might have a purge this bonfire night.
Yeah, that sounds very therapeutic.
Yeah.
So how does curiosity play a part in your creative process?
Well, I think curiosity is integral to creativity. If you're not asking questions about everything, well, then you kind of go, what's the point? There's so much to ask questions about. I get really teased by my family. I start, I go, but why? What is this and what that? And there's a point where, family and friends just kind of stop and they go, I don't know. in a slightly dead way. And I go, oh, but why is it like this? Why have they said that? And why is that? I don't know. And I go, oh, right, I've got to reach the point where I'm just asking way too many questions and I just don't know. But I suppose curiosity, it's a double thing. I think it can incorporate fear as well. So I think there's a thing I put in the book about, because I have a little section on curiosity, and I think one of the prompts with that is about, go and open a door that you've never opened before. And that's a bit scary, but that gives you a feeling. You feel it. You go, oh, what is that door? Sometimes you're out and you go, is that door open? Oh, what's behind it? I think you've got to have those questions. Or even like me as a child with the plant, I'm like, what is in there? And then you discover things. If you run out of curiosity, I can't see the point for much. You have to be curious to carry on learning, and there's so much to learn. We'll never know everything, and even if you just go, I'm just going to study fungi or something, and I'm going to learn everything about fungi, you will still be curious about elements of that. Or I think it's important to stay curious about elements of everything, picking up clues and utilising them some way down the line.
That's kind of leading in nicely to another word that I had jotted down, which is investigating. And it seems like curiosity sparks the investigation.
Definitely. I think unless you've got the curiosity, why would you investigate? Maybe an investigation can be quite a sort of logical thing. I need to find out how many leaves are on this branch or something. That can be an investigation. But if you have a curious investigation, or the investigation is led by your curiosity, you will keep going further and further and further and go, oh my God. I mean, I'm sitting here now at my table looking at a vase which has got nasturtiums in it. And I sort of, having talked to you about pulling plants apart, I think, I just want to look and see why it's a bit darker there and a bit dark. So I want to do an investigation into a nasturtium at the moment. And I think we limit ourselves to that. I probably will do an investigation into a nasturtium as well, rather than just thinking about it. And I think as adults, we do limit ourselves we just limit ourselves. We have an idea and we just don't do anything about it.
That's true. I think along the way, sometimes you get shut down, like you were saying, with people who didn't want you asking so many questions.
Yeah.
And it's encouraged when you're young to investigate. And then there's a certain point where it doesn't become really acceptable anymore.
Yeah, what is that point? I don't know. Is it teens or no? Because my teenager asks loads of questions. I don't know. Maybe it's a point where you discover that there's something called being cool, and you go, that's really, I can't ask that. I should know that. They all seem to know the answer. I'm not going to ask it. Whereas I don't think I was ever cool.
Yeah, me either.
So I just carried on asking questions.
So these are all points that I wrote down, just jotted down from your book. And something else that you talk about is boredom.
Yeah.
And I think very often we don't allow ourselves to be bored these days.
Yeah, it's a dirty word, isn't it? Being bored, there's so much to do. I remember a lot of my childhood, I remember being bored and thinking, well, what am I going to do? I've got to do something. And I think that often led to, really interesting stuff. I was in the brownies and I loved doing my brownie badges in the summer, and that did stem out of boredom. Adult, we have such busy lives, there's so much to do, but often it's quite boring. Even having a toddler, they go, they're constantly wanting to go to the park, wanting to do this stuff, and you go, oh yeah, for a minute it's quite, well, no, even an hour, you go, yeah, I can do this. And then they go, again. You go, this is kind of mind-numbing. But there is a place for that. There is a place for boredom and how you might move on from that. And in order to move on from it, you have to be able to acknowledge it and go, I'm bored. I'm bored with Instagram, or I'm bored with having to reply to lots of emails, but it's part of a process. It is part of it. It's just, I wouldn't say, you must go and, find the time to be bored. In a way, I don't have to say that, because that will happen. People do get bored, but I think it's just important to encourage it in the sense of acknowledging it, because it's in those places where your mind wanders, and sometimes brilliant things come out of that.
So I'm not a mother yet, but I like to ask guests of this show if they're parents, that if becoming a parent changes your view of creativity at all.
I think what it does as a parent is kind of unleash more creativity, because you have to be, you have this little thing who's just hungry for experience. You kind of start looking at the world a bit more through their eyes. And for me personally, that was great, because it was kind of how I like seeing the world anyway. And it makes you do stuff. It does. I think it genuinely makes you just engage with your creativity a lot more, because children need that.
And you also talk about babies and children's curiosity in your book, and how that's a lot more, I guess, close to them or natural for them than once we become adults.
I think children like to, create a massive mess around them, not because they think it's mess, but just because it's really interesting to, pull flowers out of a vase, or, squash a melted bar of chocolate into the carpet. It's really interesting. Actually, even saying that, I kind of want to go at but you just go, oh, look, it completely changes the texture of the carpet. And it's doing weird things over my fingers. How can that bar of chocolate just disappear like that? And then someone comes in and goes, what on earth are you doing? Because it's created a mess. Whereas that investigation, that curiosity is how you learn. And they're being creative in that moment. They're going, oh, with all this weird chocolate stuff on my fingers, if I wipe it on a wall, oh, that's interesting. It makes a mark. Oh, what if I do this? They can't, they're learning and then processing through being creative, even though it looks like a big mess.
So what else fascinates you?
I've been taking pictures of telephone boxes since I was 19. So they fascinate me, as well as natural decay. I'm a bit fascinated with things decaying, including kind of things like the underneath of boats. But the underneath of boats actually frighten me. And then that leads to another fascination, I suppose. But I'm also, in my notes that I wrote down, I thought, I'm really fascinated by the American West, Westerns and stuff. I absolutely love all that. And I don't know whether you've read any Willa Cather.
I haven't.
But I love her stuff, and it's all kind of those pioneers. She's written a book called Oh Pioneers, and My Antonia, and Song of the Lark. Yeah, so I'm a bit kind of fascinated by Westerns and space films, which are a different version of a Western
That's true.
My opinion. So there you go, that, and obviously art and design.
I love it. The first time I went into London, the train went past this old junkyard that was full of old telephone boxes.
Oh, that's near me. Yeah, Red Hill. That's in Red Hill. The guy who owns that used to work for the company that was employed to pull up a lot of the old telephone boxes. And he bought them. He bought loads of them thinking, I could do these up. And, they stayed there for years. I mean, they're still there. It's known as the telephone graveyard. But now he does them up, and I think there was an article in the New York Times recently about him. And it's got a website. He sells them for an absolute fortune.
That's amazing.
It's coming to his own. Yeah.
So your book has a lot of prompts and exercises. And if someone's listening and they want to reconnect to their creativity, what's one thing that you would suggest that they do?
You're niching me down. I think that's quite difficult. Okay. One thing, really important thing, is to make a commitment to it. To go, okay, if I want to reconnect to my creativity, make some sort of commitment. If you're just going to do things because you want it to be pretty, that's not a commitment to investigation and curiosity. So it's going, I'm really going to make this part of my life. It's just there on, on your peripheral vision, this creative stuff you can do. I said to someone the other day, they go, "Oh, I don't have time to be creative." I was like, you do have time to flick an aubergine or an eggplant, as you might, listen to what that sound is. And they're like, "Oh, what's that?" And it's like, look, you flick an aubergine and it sounds amazing. That's the level of commitment I'm talking about. So you can be cooking and going, what does a courgette sound like if I flick it? But I suppose the commitment I'm talking about is making a commitment to act on your curiosity, because that will then lead to creativity.
Well, it has been great to talk to you.
Yeah, and you.
Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you for taking the time to, read the book and really engage with it. It means a lot.
Once again, thanks so much for listening to the first season of the podcast. If you could take a minute to leave a review, that would mean the world to me. It really helps other people to find the episode. And you can find the show notes from today's episode, as well as the gift guide, at kindlecuriosity.com. The podcast is going on hiatus, but the Patreon perks are not. So if you'd like to join in and support season 2 of the podcast, you can find all the details for that at kindlecuriosity.com. And a special thanks to all of my patrons who keep this podcast advert-free. Have a great holiday season, and I'll see you in December with our special holiday episode.